I find Mr. Darcy a wonderful man. In fact, I agree with my aunt when I say this. Obstinacy is the only defect in his character. He's been accused of many faults at different times, but this is the only true one. I love him for the kindness that he has shown all.
Her eyes.
Anything else? Any other body part you want to mention?
Well, no. When I met her at a ball in Netherfield, I had at first scarcely allowed her to be pretty. I must confess I had looked at her without admiration at the ball, and when we next met, I looked at her only to criticize. But that was in the past, before I had the chance to know her character. Once I had, I became violently in love with her. The happiness which her reply to my proposals was such as I have never felt before. But I believe that the main reason why I married her was because of her eyes.
Married for love. I can tell you that if I hadn't married for love, I would be within the clutches of Mr. Collins. I would have married Mr. Collins to secure a secure future for myself, but my feelings in every respect forbade it. In fact, I had originally rejected Mr. Darcy after he proposed to me because in my eyes he seemed such a wretched man. But that is all in the past. I certainly didn't marry Mr. Darcy for his wealth.
Oh, Elizabeth!
Yes, Mamma.
Tell them how much Mr. Darcy makes a year.
£10,000.
A lucky mother am I.
You'll have to excuse Mrs. Bennet. She is a socialist personality. So she does talk quite frequently.
Obviously love. Why else would I marry Elizabeth? I proposed to her against my will, against my reason, and against my character. But it would not do. I was too much in love with her, not to express my feelings.
Then why did you propose to her if you, obviously didn't like her?
Well, because of her eyes.
Over the course that I've known him, my sentiments had undergone so material a change since the period of which he first proposed to me. I must confess, I hadn't always loved Mr. Darcy. When he first proposed to me, I had rejected his advances. To put it in a summary, Mr. Darcy knows of a man named Mr. Wickham. When Mr. Darcy's father, Mr. Darcy, died, Mr. Darcy inherited everything belonging to Mr. Darcy. However, Mr. Darcy promised a sum to Mr. Wickham, since Mr. Wickham's father had worked for Mr. Darcy. Before I heard an account from Mr. Darcy, I heard from Mr. Wickham how Darcy had wronged him of his promised sum. Clouded by prejudice, I believed him, and had that consequently began to lower my opinion of Darcy even further. But after my first rejection of him, he wrote me a letter dealing with a series of events that unfolded in reality. Mr. Darcy had paid Mr. Wickham a reasonable sum, but Mr. Wickham, being greedy, wanted more. Mr. Darcy didn't bequeath any more money to Mr. Wickham upon his absurd request, so Mr. Wickham felt wronged. After this letter, my feelings for Mr. Darcy began to drastically change for the better.
Yes, but you didn't answer the question.
Oh dear me, I'm terribly sorry. What was the question?
When did you realize you were in love?
I believe it was when I told Mr. Darcy about what happened to poor Lydia, but that was a whole testimony by itself.
That's it? I thought you were gonna say it was when you saw his eyes.
Why would I proclaim something like that?
No reason. Just a guess. When I saw her eyes at the first ball in Netherfield.
Are you 100% sure there is no other time that you can think of?
No. If you are not satisfied with my answers, then I can perfectly well quit the room.
No, it's fine. It's just that you talk way less than Elizabeth. And you only talk about her eyes.
Pemberley. I had seen the estate beforehand on a trip with my aunt and uncle. I had never seen a place for which nature had done more, where natural beauty had been so little counteracted by an awkward taste. When I first encountered the estate, I was in admiration. At the moment when I first beheld it, I felt that to be mistress of Pemberley might be something.
I plan to live in Pemberley with Elizabeth. I've grown up and lived my entire life in such a state, and I fancy it. I do not believe that Elizabeth will reject living at Pemberley, since she does appear to appreciate and adore the estate itself.
I believe that my family definitely impacted the events leading up to our marriage. The Gardeners would have been the biggest impact. In fact, we still have them at Pemberley sometimes. It all began when my aunt and uncle planned a trip to go see these beautiful lakes. Unfortunately, Mr. Gardiner was prevented by business from setting out till a fortnight later than planned and had to go to London again within a month. And as that left too short a period for us to go too fast and see too much as we had originally proposed, or at least to see it with leisure and comfort we had built on, we were obliged to give up on the lakes and substitute for more contracted toil. And according to the plan we formulated then, we were to go no farther northward than Derbyshire. Before we reached Derbyshire, we passed by Pemberley. My aunt asked me whether I wanted to visit the estate, but after my initial rejection of Mr. Darcy, I had no plans to visit him at his home whatsoever. I learned that Mr. Darcy was not at Pemberley currently, so we visited the estate. Imagine my embarrassment when Mr. Darcy came back at Pemberley while we were still visiting the exterior grounds. I became even more surprised when he walked up to me and spoke to me. After my initial rejection, I thought it was not possible for him to do such a thing, and yet he even went so far to invite me to meet his sister. If not for the Gardiners, I might never have met Mr. Darcy again, nor would I have met his lovely sister.
It is, without a doubt, my aunt who impacted our marriage the most. Without her, I would have never married Elizabeth. My aunt, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, I was later informed, had talked to Elizabeth, attempting to convince her not to marry me. On her return through London, she related her journey to me, its motive and the substance of a conversation with Elizabeth. It taught me hope, as I had scarcely ever allowed myself to hope before. I knew enough of her disposition to be certain that, had she been absolutely, irrevocably decided against me, she would have acknowledged it to Lady Catherine, frankly and openly. But since she continually rejected Lady Catherine's requests to reject my future proposals, if there would be any, I knew that I had a chance with her. So I visited Elizabeth at Longbourn, and that's when I proposed. The rest is history.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.